Hello, everyone, and welcome to podcast episode number 2 of the Health and Fitness Podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Mr. Correale, and thank you very much for listening. As always, as mentioned before, if you have any questions or comments, please email me at Coach Correale. Correale spelled Correale. So Coach Correale at gmail.com. And I got a few questions sent to me in the last week or so. So I'm going to answer those closer to the end of the podcast. But if you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear from you. So please let me know, and then I can possibly answer your questions on the next podcast. Also, if you see me in the hallways or you want to speak to me in person, that's totally fine as well. I teach period 2 in room 335. So if you needed to, or you wanted to ask a question or you have a comment, I'll take that in person as well. It's always much appreciated. As you can see, I'm going with camera on, just trying something new. Just hopefully the content and the information still meets you well, even though you can see me here. So let's talk about muscle contractions. And so when we talk about contractions, okay, this is, and when it relates to muscle, remember, there's different types of muscle. You have cardiac muscle, which is also known as myogenic muscle. You have smooth muscle, which is going to entail the muscle of the organs. And then you have skeletal muscle, which we're concerned with here on this platform. Skeletal muscle is a voluntary muscle, meaning that you control the contraction. When you hear that term contraction, remember, your muscle is responding to a stimulus, and you are responding to that stimulus with a muscular contraction. A stimulus is something that the body is perceiving through audio or visual or whatever it may be, and your body then responds accordingly. If we think of a track and field 100-meter race, the stimulus is the start of the gun, and then you're off, and your body will respond in a way voluntarily, guided by your nervous system, of course, to start contracting muscles in a way that will allow you to gain speed and momentum. When we have a muscular contraction take place, remember, a muscle can only pull. Right? A muscle will only pull, and it's going to pull towards the middle of the muscle belly and appear that the muscle is shortening. So if you take the simple action of a bicep curl, we have the subsequent lengthening of the muscle and then the shortening. The shortening of the muscle, that muscle contraction, the muscle is being pulled towards the midline of the muscle belly. And sometimes we get, terms like, flex your muscle. Like that's flexion is a type of movement. We should be saying contract your muscle in order to shorten it, to show the contracted or maximal tension that you can generate within a given muscle that you're trying to show. Now, we have 2 basic types of muscular contraction. One is called isometric, the other one is called isotonic. Isometric contractions are contractions that occur when there is tension built up with the muscle, but there's no movement that occurs. So if you want to think of a wall sit that maybe you've done in a gym class, planking, this is isometric. Tension is generated within the muscle, but you're not moving at all, right? This is known as a static contraction. There's benefits to this. In the 60s, there was a craze I remember reading about in terms of within athletes, track and field athletes, that had to or were trying to integrate isometric contractions within their training. And the benefit was that a muscle will gain strength, or you can gain strength in a muscle if you are generating tension over a given amount of time. So the training methodology of isometrics came into play, where if you can statically hold a position, or you can hold a really heavy weight in not a very large range of motion, but if you can hold it into maximum generation of tension, this is going to help with strength gain. And we've kind of gone away with that with the idea of progressive resistance. So isometric contractions is when we're generating that tension voluntarily, but there's no movement within the joint at all. Okay, and remember, when we talk about movement, movement of muscle happens about a joint. Either we are decreasing the angle between the two bones within the joint, or we're increasing that angle between those two. Now, the isotonic contraction involves the generation of tension within the muscle, but then it also involves the movement about a joint, okay, where two bones are meeting to create this joint. Now, within the isotonic contraction, we have the concentric and the eccentric contraction. Maybe you've heard of these. So what ends up happening is, in a concentric contraction, it's this classical sense of the muscle shortening. So we are that idea of the muscle pulling to its midline in order to shorten to generate tension. Eccentric is the opposite of that. An eccentric contraction is one that will go ahead and lengthen the muscle, but more so you can think of it as this idea of lowering the weight back to starting or resting position. Here we have more gravity at play here during the eccentric contraction in terms of getting back to that normal position. So if we go to our classical bicep curl, a concentric contraction would be getting it to shorten. My eccentric contraction would be slowly, under control, lowering it to resting position. You should always be, in terms of safety-wise, you should always be lowering your weights back down to resting or set up position with the most control possible. Yes, in Olympic lifting and so on, you have bumper plates that you can just drop and so on when need be. But some people actually take the concentric and eccentric contractions. They use that modality, that kind of balancing act, to help in their hypertrophy or their muscular growth training. So if you were to, and some people do focused eccentric contractions, and the thought is that by controlling the lengthening of the muscle, you're making the muscle stronger, you're making it larger, which could benefit them for their activity or sport. The best example of this that I can give is if you're fighting for getting, let's say, your first pull-up. One of the progressions of getting a pull-up is to do eccentrics from a flexed bar hang position. Remember, we'll talk about this because there was a question about calisthenics. If I'm doing a pull-up, okay, so this is pull-up grip where my palms are facing away from me, if this is the bar, and this is chin-up, my palms are facing me. Either way, a good activity of progression to get that first pull-up is if you're able to step up onto a box and let's say get your chin over the bar and you hold, and then you slowly lower yourself in a controlled fashion to that extended position. That path of travel from the bar in that flexed position to then lengthening, that is helping that neural pathway, that patterning of your mind as well, to get that voluntary muscle to know, okay, how are we moving? What's the path that we need this muscle to move? Even though you might not have the requisite strength yet, you're still patterning good movement. You're still developing some strength in that eccentric position. Now, you may have also heard the term isokinetic. And isokinetic exercise is essentially using machines that use cables or some type of banded work. And this is common in big box gyms that you may have been to or frequenting, or because of COVID now you're able to go back to. And these shouldn't be discounted. These have benefit. In terms of the way that maybe one starts or gets introduced to resistance or weight training, isokinetic exercise or machine exercises are a great way to do that. Though the one benefit at the beginning is that range of motion is controlled for you by the cable and pulley system or by the machine itself. Eventually, the user should progress to free weights, dumbbells, kettlebells, barbells, whatever it may be. Also for the injured athlete, I think machines have a lot of value in terms of that control of range of motion, especially people who are coming back from maybe some type of injury. Once again, muscles are under your voluntary control. Okay, we have a vast nervous system that will reach every part of our body through long, delicate neurons. And the same goes true for our muscles. Our muscles are made up of muscle fibers. Each muscle fiber is innervated or connected to a motor nerve. This is called a motor unit. So a motor unit consists of the muscle fiber and the motor neuron that is controlling the contraction or the twitch of that muscle. Now, one motor neuron can branch out and innervate multiple fibers, which is a benefit because let's say we want to generate max tension. We want all the firing of those neurons, that sending of messages via those neurons to the muscle fibers to act in one concentrated, forceful contraction. Now, when we talk about motor units around the body, we have to then take into account something called the all or none principle. And this is where a motor unit that is acting upon, or a motor neuron acting upon a series of muscle fibers, it will contract to its fullest once that stimulus is received and once the message is sent out via that motor neuron to the muscle fibers. Now, if we talk about, let's say, the muscles of the quad, these are big muscles. The glutes, these are big muscles. So the more motor units you can recruit through nervous system contraction, the more power you can produce, the more force you can produce, the more tension you can produce. However, if we talk about, let's say, the small muscles that are within our eyeball that have to use very finite and acute movements, you're not recruiting as many motor units within the eyeball because you have to have a kind of submaximal activity of the muscles because they're so small within. So the larger the muscle, or the more forceful of a contraction that's needed out of a muscle, the more motor units you have to be able to recruit. And so now how do we do that? Well, that comes through training. If you are patterning good movement within, let's say, a squat, a deadlift, or a press, then you're practicing through your training how to recruit those motor units to fire those muscle fibers in that large concentrated sense. And this may then carry over to your sport if you're a runner, a thrower, a football player, rugby, whatever it may be. So remember, your training, your programming is helping to not only get your muscles stronger, bigger, but you're also greasing that groove of neural activity. You're practicing the way that the neurons are going to fire to generate tension within that muscle. So this is also another offshoot of why you should think of training as practice, right? You're practicing the movement, right? You're practicing the movement, and it's a long-term game. So that ends the kinesiology connection portion of the podcast. I'm going to get to the questions that I had and comments that I had this week. The first one was a very good one. I'm gonna read this one out, and this is from Fawaz, and I believe Fawaz is in grade 12, and he's an athlete on the cross country team. I do recall that. His question is, I was wondering if you can talk about calisthenics, like what it is, how it works, and the benefits of it. I'm currently a runner, but I also want to get into calisthenics for the future. I thought it might be interesting. Okay, so Fawaz, thank you very much, and this is a great question. Now, when you hear the term calisthenics, this is not new. This is something that's been around for a very long time. Calisthenics has historically, it has its training modalities embedded within military training. Okay, and something used then carried over to the early PE or physical education systems worldwide, maybe in the States. If you can YouTube videos there. I can't remember the high school. There's a high school in California. It's like maybe post World War II or post World War I, leading into World War II, and it's a phys ed class, and it's all males. They got really short shorts. No one's wearing a shirt, and they have this military style training obstacle course at their school where they're doing all sorts of net climbs and pull-ups and push-ups and burpees, and essentially that's what calisthenics is. It's using your body weight in order to move through a movement. And in terms of from an aesthetic point of view, you can get a lot out of calisthenics. I think in terms of everyone should be able to do a proper push-up, everyone should be able to plank, everyone should be able to get to do chin-ups and pull-ups. And that's the foundation to calisthenics. Now, the one benefit is, the risk of injury is lower because, unlike weight training where you may be loading too much weight or you're using improper form, you could get injured. Calisthenics, we don't have that issue because you're just using your body weight and gravity to go through those motions. Now, calisthenics body weight training does require some coaching, right? So you still need to, reach out and make sure that you're doing proper techniques for push-ups, for pull-ups. For example, if you ask a elementary school kid to do a push-up, their push-ups, they like to have their palms turned inward and they have that style of pressing movement. Instead, the elbow should be back. All right, our elbow should, when we do a push-up, our elbow should be pointed back, and our grip can vary, but the whole time that elbow has to come back, not outward when doing that push-up. Same thing with pull-ups or chin-ups. We want to make sure that the elbows don't come out. The elbows have to stay in and pull back and down. So there is some coaching that is involved in there. Now, for an athlete, I wouldn't recommend purely bodyweight or calisthenics training. I would use it in conjunction with a proper strength training protocol. So Fawaz mentions in his question, he's a runner. There's great programs out there that are for runners, but I think runners, even though they're long distance cross-country runners or track and field athletes, I would suggest, every workout should have a push, a pull, a squat, a hinge, a press. The pull can be pull-ups, right? Your press maybe should be a vertical military press with dumbbells, kettlebell, barbell. You should do a hinge, maybe a deadlift, a kettlebell swing. And when you look at, a squat, you can, any type of goblet squat is actually ideal in terms of even putting it in the warm-up. So, great question. Calisthenics is fantastic for that aesthetic appeal. If you know how to if you're able to move your body freely with push-ups and pull-ups and so on. But for the athlete, I would start getting into resistance strength training, the use of barbell, dumbbells, kettlebells, and so on. But you can also add that calisthenics body weight work into that. I got some great value. I don't have, my knee health is not very good, especially my left knee is not very good. So I don't do too much squatting, but I found in the past that putting in isometric squat holds, where I'm just squatting at parallel and holding and generating tension, that helps out my knee. That gives me, that makes my knee happy when I do that in a warm-up activity. Okay, so I hope that helps. And I know Fawaz, you asked another question about mindset and training mindset, and I'm going to hold off because I'll talk about that one on the next podcast. But thank you, I appreciate that, and I enjoy talking with you via email. Also, just the last item on that, if you want to look up some good resources on calisthenics, there's two individuals, Al and Danny Cavadlo. They're based out of New York. One of their books, I think it's Diamond Cut Abs. It's a little bit older, but if YouTube them, they have a great YouTube channel. They got tons of content on calisthenic training, which they focused on. And once you look at them, they're two guys. They're all tatted up, but they're like older than I am. They're like in their 50s, I think, but they're just shredded. So You can look them up if you want some more information on that. Okay, and the second question was, Sophia came and saw me in my class the other day, and I've known Sophia now for about a year or so via the Health and Fitness Club Google Classroom. And her question pertained kind of getting back into the swing of things of training, and her dilemma was she's only training or only able to train a short amount of time, 2 or 3 days a week. And so the idea is now, well, how should you plan a program or protocol for that? And I appreciate her coming up and speaking. It's not our first time doing that, so I always enjoy talking with her. So if, let's say, theoretically, you only had 2 days to work out a week, I would avoid you thinking to yourself, okay, day 1 will be all upper body and day 2 will be all lower body. Because you're only training 2 days a week, you can very effectively on those 2 days train full body. Like I mentioned before, a squat, a hinge exercise, a press exercise, some type of pull, and then some type of loaded carry. And you can do that. There's a wide variety of exercises you can do. I don't want to get into that right now, but you could do that for both days a week. And after day 1, you'll be fresh for day 2. You'll have enough time to rest, even if you're doing, let's say, a Monday, Wednesday, where you only have 1 day rest in between. I think where you can really benefit is, what are you doing on those other days? A nice, long, brisk walk would benefit greatly. So let's say you lifted Monday, lifted Wednesday, walk, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, maybe a longer hike on the weekend. That would do you any good. And actually, thinking of it, like even I've found this has kind of helped over the past 2 years or so. Is I would do my lifting session, and then right after my last exercise, which is usually loaded carries, I would go for a nice brisk walk, maybe 30-35 minutes. And I've found that some great results from that in terms of how I feel, body composition, because the walking, if you're doing it after a workout, it's a great modality, because think of it, as you're working out, your body is using up carbohydrate sugar. And as soon as that carbohydrate sugar then, let's say, decreases or is depleted, then your body starts recruiting fats to be broken down in order to then be used as energy. Well, right after, let's say, a lifting workout, and your lifting workout, if you're doing it in let's say, a fasted state, you can get that same effect where your fatty acids want to be broken down. Then that walk after your workout represents that afterburn, meaning that whatever leftover fatty acids you have that are ready to be used, you're using them in a very slow, controlled activity like walking. So walking after the workout and then walking on those off days, if we only have 2 days a week, I think you can get some benefit from that. And then, we spoke with Sophia about this is just her starting up, and then you can ramp up to, let's say, a third day or fourth day, wherever possible. Now, when selecting your rep schemes, especially if you're starting off, think of what's called the rule of 10. You pick an exercise. Let's say you're doing military barbell press, okay, from the front rack position. 10 reps. You can break up those 10 reps into 2 sets of 5, 5 sets of 2, 3 sets of 3. And remember, the workout, the training, it shouldn't be exhaustive. You should come out of it at the end of it saying, okay, that was great, I worked, but you shouldn't be debilitatingly sore. You shouldn't be broken, because then that's going to affect what you can do the next day. Right. And so this kind of connects back to that mindset piece that Foz and I kind of spoke about a little bit, is if you want to hit it every day, you have to train smart, right? You have to train smart. You can't blow yourself up on day 1 and expect day 2 you're going to be fresh, ready to go, right? So especially when starting off, the ideas of impatience, I want to get stronger now, it's a long-term game. Okay, it's a long-term gain. So if you started with, let's say, 2 sets of 5 and you work that rep scheme for all your different exercises within that full body workout, then you can very easily then ramp up to 3 sets of 8 after maybe 2 weeks, and do that for another 2 weeks, and then 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 12, in that respect, right? Your mileage may vary in terms of, how heavy or how light or what type of equipment you have, but that'd be a smart way to do it. So if you're just starting out and you have 2 or 3 days a week, full body is ideal. Walk on the off days. Try to walk after your workout, and you should get some good usage out of that. So, Sophia, keep me up to date with how that's going, and if there's anything else I can do to help you, let me know. Okay, everybody, that's episode number 2. I appreciate the questions. If you have questions, please Coach Correale at gmail.com. This is very informal. There's no judgment at all. I'd love to hear from you. I enjoy helping young people because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, or there's a lot of information and you may not necessarily know how to navigate those waters. So I'd like to give you a hand with that. So with that being said, I'll sign off right now. Appreciate all the comments. I look forward to hearing from you, and we'll have the next podcast ready for you next week. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you once again for listening.